There's a way to chasten children, and it's talked about in the Scripture. But this idea where children rebel against their parents and they curse their parents and they're not afraid of their parents, there's no respect for their parents, you got a problem. Society has a problem. Because if they don't respect you, they won't respect their teachers, they won't respect the law officers, they won't respect the judge. And it's going to be hard for them because they'll end up in jail. Secondly, family matters to you. Again, think of how much your life revolves around your family. You were born into a family. You grew up in a family. And I have to say, as I grew up on the streets of Belfast in Northern Ireland, it's interesting, some of these older folks, they went through maybe the depression or difficult times, and they said, we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor because everybody else was poor. I look at some of these old photographs of people growing up in Northern Ireland. Nobody had shoes before like 1940 probably. All the kids had no shoes. Didn't think a thing about it. Our houses, and even the house we first bought in Northern Ireland, didn't have any heating system. We had one source of heat, it was a coal fire in the living room, and that was it. And I remember as a kid getting up in the morning, it was freezing. Ice on the inside of the paneling type thing. And running to the living room, my daddy's already got a fire going, and you would get dressed in front of the fire, you were freezing. I never thought a thing about it. There was things that we didn't have. And even my relationship with my father, my daddy, I don't ever my daddy remember my daddy telling me that he loved me. Don't remember it. He wasn't really a tactile. He didn't hug me or anything like that. And I never thought a thing about it. I don't think it warped me in any way. But there's things that we didn't have. There's some of those relationships were maybe not following the Scriptures and not exactly what they should have been. But at the same time, children are resilient, aren't they? I mean, there's things that they put up with and they don't even know they're putting up with it, and they still turn out right. But you see, all of us come from that background. All of us have a family. And then we learned about growing up in that family and learning life through that family and learning about love in that family. And then we left Mommy and Daddy to begin our own family. We have our own families, and then our children have now gone to leave and to establish their own families. You see, the family's a really big deal for all of us. I said this last week. I said, we love our church. Thank God for our church. We love being here. And some of you don't want to leave, and that's a good thing. But where do you go from here? Besides La Cazone? You might go to La Cazone, but then you leave La Cazone and you're going to go home. Now, we live 27 miles from here. But every Sunday when we leave this place, we go home. And sometimes we might be entertaining somebody or take somebody out. We go home, we're there an hour. It takes us 45 minutes to get home. And then we're there an hour and we come back 45 minutes. Why do you do it? We love coming home. Now, we've got to walk the dog too. But I love our house. And I love Leslie. And I love our children. I love home. And home is where you relax. It's where you can it's like a little oasis. And it's supposed to be that way. Lord, help the people who go home and it's a fighting and a feuding and it's tension and walking on eggshells and there's bitterness and all kinds of problems. It's not supposed to be like that, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I tasted some of that when I was growing up. My daddy was a drinker, and this happened during the time of the Troubles, and I guess it was an escape mechanism from my daddy, and he started making homebrew in the bathtub. Imagine drinking stuff that was made in a bathtub. Can you imagine? But he did. And he started drinking. And then it got worse and worse. And alcohol was a problem. And then there was fighting and feuding in the house with my mummy. And it was a terrible thing, a terrible experience. But it doesn't have to be that way. And thank God our children didn't have to experience that. And your children don't have to either. Now, we love our church, but we go home from here. You may have a job. I hope you do have a job. I hope you enjoy your job. I hope you like your job. But you know what? Whether you love your job or you hate your job, at 5 o'clock you clock out and where do you go? You go home. See, home should be important to you. Have expectations for your home. You should have. All of us should have that home that is a place of blessedness. And even for those of us who are widows or widowed, it's a difficult thing. Probably the most difficult thing after the funeral. And you go home to a house that's empty. There's nobody there. Because, it's not really the house that's your home, right? I mean, you can have a little 2-room hovel of a place, but if your loved ones are there, it's happy. You could have a mansion. You go home to nobody. That's the thing about it. It's a sad thing. Some of the richest people in the world are the loneliest people in the world because they wasted their lives making money and they neglected those relationships, and now they've been divorced 4 times and they're living in this big mansion all by themselves and they're very unhappy. It's not the way it's supposed to be. You've got to put the emphasis where God puts the emphasis, and that is the relationships in our homes. We're going to be talking about this in detail. And this is just introductory. I understand that this morning. But I'm hoping I'm whetting your appetite, because we got a lot of stuff we're going to talk about that's really, really important. We're going to be speaking about the relationship between the husband and the wife. That's really the bedrock. That's the center of the home. Children, parents, it's the husband and wife that makes the home what it's supposed to be. And that relationship you have with your husband is really important. That relationship you enjoy with your wife, it matters. It matters to you. It matters to God. And I'll tell you what, if you get the husband-wife thing sorted out, your children will be happy. Now, we've got to talk about the children too, but that's the key thing. And one of the things I knew growing up was that my daddy loved my mommy, even in spite of all the alcohol and fights and everything. And I knew that my daddy was always faithful to my mother. Never doubted that. And there's something about a sense of security that brings. If people are fighting and they talk about divorce and we're leaving and all this and that breeds insecurity in children's lives. The relationship between husband and wife, it really matters. The relationship between parents and children, we're going to talk about that. About how to raise your children. Now, we'll not get into the depth maybe that we could get into that, but that's really important. And we're living in a time right now, and I hope it's not true in your home and your family, but you look around you in society, you see things on YouTube or on TV, and kids are completely lawless. The problem is now the kids are now adults. And now the police have to deal with these people who have never been spanked in their life. Have you ever seen some of these people? Never been spanked in their lives. They fight with the police, they spit, they curse. And they have to put them in handcuffs and leg irons to carry them off to the jail because it's the first time they've had anybody say no to them. Well, they should have learned that in the house. I'll tell you what, they should have learned that before they were 5 years old. You know, our kids were disciplined, but I'll have to be honest with you, most of the discipline happened before they were 4 or 5 years old. By the time they got 5 years old, all I had to do was look, and especially Mommy. When Leslie looked, that was even worse, because they'd already been spanked. And it's not just about spanking. By the way, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but there's no place whatsoever for abuse of children. There's a way to chasten children, and it's talked about in the Scripture. But this idea where children rebel against their parents and they curse their parents and they're not afraid of their parents, there's no respect for their parents, you got a problem. Society has a problem. Because if they don't respect you, they won't respect their teachers, they won't respect the law officers, they won't respect the judge. And it's going to be hard for them because they'll end up in jail. Or something even worse than that. Unless they get the training in the home. The relationships between parents and children is so very important, and there's a way to do it. And it tells you right here. The problem is we don't open up the manual. This is the manual for life. If we follow what it says, I'll tell you, you'll have a whole lot easier life. If we neglect what it says, well, there's pain. We'll talk about other relationships, brothers and sisters, grandparents, in-laws and outlaws. Some of the worst problems you might have as a married couple is your in-laws. Did you know when you get married, people say, well, here I'm marrying my daughter off, right? And, well, we're getting a son, we're getting another son. No, you're losing your daughter. A man is to leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife. When your children leave your home, they are establishing their own family, independent from you. There's many times I wanted to say something to our children. There's many times I wanted to chasten our grandchildren. And I have when they're not there. But when they're there, I say to Jennifer, there was one time I think it was Weston, I was going to spank, and I said, you know what? That's not my responsibility, that's your responsibility. Now, if our children ask us for advice, we'll be all over that. But if they don't ask us for advice, then it's interference. And sometimes they got to learn the lesson their own way. Now, you should be there for them, support them and love them no matter what. But they're establishing their own family. And the Bible speaks about that. In-laws and outlaws. But family matters to you. It ought to. And if it doesn't this morning, I'm going to tell you something, it will one day. And if you don't look after your home, it'll bite you. And you know, God's very long-suffering. Maybe your wife, your husband's very long-suffering, but at some point it will turn back on you if you're not doing it right, and you will regret not looking after those relationships. Like the rich man in the big house who's celebrating Christmas all by himself. I don't want to be that guy. I want to have my wife by my side all the days of my life. I told you this. I said to Leslie many years ago, I says, if you leave me, I'm following you. I'm coming with you. If you leave me, I'm coming with you. I'm going to pitch a tent in your front yard. I think they call that stalking. I would be your stalker because I can't live without her. And relationships with your children, it should be forever. And so God's design is to have happy, wholesome, loving, respectful homes, to know peace and love and laughter and happiness. That's what God's blueprint is. So it's worthy of you coming here the next few Sunday mornings to hear some of this stuff. It's worth your looking into yourself and studying what the Bible has to say about this. It's worth every effort or any changes that you think you need to make in your life. It's worth everything as you cooperate with the instructions of God, because it really does matter.